So it's great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I think, as Olga Glazova may have shared, I have a long history with Concordia International. I was actually one of the first professors there because
There
I
because
lived
I
and
lived
taught
and
in
taught in
Ukraine
Ukraine.
for 5 years, and I was, I think, in the second semester that Concordia was open, I began to teach there and worked closely with the doctors for Alexander and Julie Romanowski. So it's a real privilege to present in the webinar. Now, what I want to talk to you about today, I want to talk about barriers to entrepreneurship for women in Ukraine, Mexico, and Hamilton County, Indiana. As you may know, our states in the United States are divided up into counties. That's the small, we have maybe 50 counties in the state of Indiana, and some states have more. But let me first tell you how I got interested in this topic, because I think you'll find this story interesting. So in 1994, I wrote my dissertation proposal to do my doctoral dissertation research. I was studying in California. I'm getting some back. Sorry, I can't hear. Sorry, getting some back. Do you want to try to mute everyone? And sorry, I can't. Okay, that's better.
Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, that's fine. Everything is
Okay.
fine. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So in 1994, I moved to Kiev. I lived there. I ended up living there for 5 years, although when I moved there, I didn't know I was going to live there for 5 years. I moved there to do research for my doctoral dissertation. I had everything done except for the book. In the American system, we write the book last. I know in the English system and in the Ukrainian system, traditionally, you start writing the book from the beginning of your doctorate program. But here we write the book last. So I had studied for 3 years. I was ready to write my book. I wanted to write about leadership, organizational leadership in Ukraine. So I got some money. I found some partners who would give me some money to go there. I got to Ukraine and I started looking for partners. I didn't speak a local language at first. I thought everyone would want to partner with me. No, of course not. And part of that is because the KGB had done research there before. So some people thought I was a spy, an American spy. Other people just didn't want someone hanging around and asking questions. So I tried some religious organizations because I had some interest in religion. So I went to a seminary and I met with the head priest, and he said, I don't really like Americans that much. And American religious people are coming here and they're getting our people to stop going to church, and thank you, but no thank you. So I went to several other organizations and I couldn't find anyone that would let me study their organization. Finally, I met a very kind leader of a university, one of the top leaders of a university, not Concordia. Concordia didn't exist at that point, but I found a big public Ukrainian university. One of the top leaders was very kind to me, and she said, yes, you can study here. So I began to study her leadership, and then she introduced me to a former student of hers who had started a business. It was a business communication business. And that former student of hers, who was now a middle-aged person, she let me study there. And that's how I got interested in entrepreneurship. I got interested in entrepreneurship in Kiev by studying a business that was founded. And I learned so much from this entrepreneur who was a woman. I learned a great deal from her. She became a major mentor of mine. and she allowed me to stay in her business. She had maybe 15 or 20 employees. She allowed me to observe, ask questions, do interviews. And of course, the very best thing that happened from that is that I met my wife there, who worked there at the time. And my wife is here, and we have been married for a long time. So that is the very best thing that happened from my visit to Ukraine, but without a question. But enough on that for now. I didn't come to tell you about my personal life today. That's how I got started. And so I then started teaching entrepreneurship. I taught my first class in entrepreneurship in Kiev. Then I moved back I ended up staying in Kiev until 1999. So I lived there for 5 years. I loved it there. But my parents were getting older. I needed to move back to America to take care of my parents. But when I moved to Indiana, within about 1 or 2 years, I started a business here. And this is interesting to you. It took me about 30 minutes to start my business, because it does not take long to start businesses in the United States, and it didn't then. I went to the local government center. I filled out a form. It took about 30 minutes to fill out the form. And I started this business, and that was the first business. And then after that, I started a second business, which was a publishing business, made some money on that. I reinvested that money, and I finally started an e-learning business. And the e-learning business grew, and it became big enough to where it became my main source of income. And I started that business in 2005 and finally retired that business about 3 years ago and started Global Talent International, which is a small business that I own now. But that's a little of my background as an entrepreneur. And as a researcher, I have chaired 50 doctoral dissertations and doctorate projects. And so I've been involved in research for a long time. Why is entrepreneurship important? Entrepreneurship is important because small business plays an important role in supporting families, as I discovered when I studied Ukraine. Am I getting some competition here? Okay, that's better. Thank you.
Sorry, it's like everyone who joins in, they have automatically their microphones on automatically, and people just do not notice that. So that's why. Sorry.
Oh, it's no problem. It's just that no one has said anything very interesting yet. If they tell us all the gossip about their family, we'll stop and listen for a while. I'm just joking. I'm just joking, of course. But so yeah, if someone joins in and starts telling us of something that's worth hearing, we'll stop and listen to them. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Entrepreneurship is important because small business plays an important role in supporting families. This is why I'm interested in entrepreneurship, and particularly entrepreneurship for women, because it plays a very important role in supporting families. And I remember when I studied entrepreneurship in Ukraine, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Many of the women who participated in that study were from smaller cities and towns. Many of them were not from Kiev. We studied 23 regions in Ukraine in that study. And I remember a newspaper owner from Uzhgorod, and I remember the owner of a flower shop from Western Ukraine. And there were others who operated restaurants. And the important thing for them was that they could support their families. They found a way to support their families through that. And it made a huge difference in the lives of both their significant others, those that were married, in the lives of their spouses, and in the lives of their children. So I think that's why it's very important. And that was true when I studied entrepreneurship in Mexico as well. That was very important in Mexico. I remember one of the business owners that I met in Mexico and interviewed in Spanish, porque yo hablo español también. And when I was interviewing her, and she talked about how that many of her children worked with her in the restaurant that she owned. And it was a supporting factor for her family. But I do want to say, before I start talking more about entrepreneurship, that I am talking now about small business. I'm not talking about Apple or Google when I talk about entrepreneurship. I'm talking about small businesses that support families. And founding a small business is different than founding Apple or Google. For one thing, many people found small businesses while they do other things. And so they are trying to found the business and live normal life at the same time. And that's different than starting a tech startup. Now, I went through periods when I was starting my own business when I was working 7 days a week all the time. But that just is not sustainable. And that's not good. So most small business owners cannot do that. They have other jobs. That's one thing that's different. And the other thing that's different is in founding a small business, many people, they use either personal funds or they use the profits from the business to grow the business. I did that. I did not use any capital in starting my businesses. I started my businesses. The first business, I made a small amount of money. I reinvested that to start the second business. And from the publishing business, I used the profits from the publishing business to found the e-learning business. So it's different, but it's very important. And here's the other thing I wanted to mention. We are in a boom of entrepreneurship around the world. In the United States, we had what we called the Great Resignation during the pandemic. Many people left their jobs, but many of them left their jobs to start businesses. And so we had a great growth of small businesses and entrepreneurship in the United States right after the pandemic. But that happened in other countries as well. I know it happened in England. And in fact, the World Economic Forum reports that outside of the agricultural sector, about a third of women around the world are employed in informal work, and many of them are entrepreneurs. So there is right now there is great growth in entrepreneurship around the world. And many of the businesses that are growing are internet-based, and therefore they can become a benefit for small rural cities, because many places in the world the smaller cities need help. The great capitals of the world often have money coming in and they have jobs coming in, but the smaller cities, they need the influx of small business. The Lubnis and the Poltavas and the Uzhgorods and other small businesses, other small towns in Indiana, the Warsaws, and also the Portlands, and the Bloomingtons. They all need it. So but here's the question that I have been asking in my research. And that is, how can we help women who are entrepreneurs overcome barriers and create an atmosphere that is conducive and welcoming to entrepreneurship in our communities? So let me share some global lessons first. And then after that, I'll discuss some research that I helped to supervise in my own county in Indiana, in Hamilton County, Indiana. I mentioned that I moved to Ukraine in 1994, and I studied a business there in 1994, but I did a nationwide study of businesses there in about 2013, 2012, we got ready in 2011, 2012. We published the first results of it in 2013. And the first study there was a nationwide study. It involved 22 areas of Ukraine. It included Crimea and Donetsk. And I came there part of the time, but I did not conduct most of the interviews. We sent researchers around Ukraine to conduct those interviews. And these were individuals with doctorates, and they were expert interviewers. They went around Ukraine and they conducted interviews. And then we had a focus group in Kiev, and I came for the focus group. The focus group was on Chevnonomyskaya Street in a room there. And I was involved. I helped to facilitate the focus group. And we learned a lot from that. And then also after that, we did a quantitative study that involved, we did a survey study. That was an interview study, a qualitative interview study that involved interviews from 22 regions and a focus group. And the focus group, about half of the 22 participants came to the focus group. So we paid their travel. They came to Kiev and they participated in that. And we learned some important things that I'll tell you in a minute. Then I repeated the same study in Mexico. The Mexican study finished about 4 years ago. I finished the Mexican study just before the pandemic. Here are some of the things that I learned from Ukraine and Mexico. So what are the barriers to entrepreneurship for women on a global scale? Well, one of the things I learned in Ukraine is one of the barriers was low self-esteem. And we ask women in that study, we asked them if they felt that starting a business was important. And many of them struggled with that. And many of them struggled with low self-esteem. Many women, many entrepreneurs that we interviewed in Ukraine, they did not feel, they felt like low confidence in themselves was a barrier. And I can really relate to that because I know that has been seen, and research has shown, research supports that low self-esteem is a challenge for many people. Low levels of confidence in themselves, that's a challenge for many people. And so that was one of the barriers. And when you think about it, that's a surprising barrier because it doesn't have a lot to do with external conditions. It has to do with what's going on inside of ourselves. And yet I can understand and see how that is important. And of course, one of the things that helps us overcome that is successful experience, life experience that's successful, but also close relationships with family and friends and significant others. We all need people in our lives that can tell us that what we do is important. And so our communities are very important. And that's the other thing. We did find that many women in Ukraine, they did communicate with others, which was great. But we found this barrier also in Mexico, that many women who started business, they struggle with low self-esteem. And I could get into that more. I actually think that is extremely important. I think particularly for young people that are starting their careers, that's important, but also for people that are moving along. We have a professional term. There's a term that's called the imposter syndrome. You can look that up in research, and it's about the idea that people don't feel qualified to do what they do. And that happens to many professionals. And we overcome that in many ways if you can see a therapist or psychologist, that's a great way to work on that. But also, whether you do that by Zoom or whether you do it in person, but also finding support from our friends and our family, making a list of our successful experiences. We all need to know what we do very well, and we need to remember that. It's very easy to focus on what we don't do well. And so those are some of the ways to get over that. But then another barrier that we found was lack of available financing. That was a greater barrier in Ukraine than it was in Mexico. Mexico has some funds where that entrepreneurs can borrow some money in Mexico. The government in Mexico has tried to make things easier financially for entrepreneurs. So there are some funds available in Mexico. In Ukraine 10 years ago, there were many women who struggled with available financing. They had trouble finding funds to start their business. But another very surprising one was lack of qualified personnel. And this we found in both Ukraine and Mexico. And it was very surprising to find this in Ukraine because 10 years ago in Ukraine, there were not many jobs. There were not enough jobs available because, as you know, many of the factories had closed in the small towns. But nevertheless, the women had trouble finding employees who would embrace their vision, who were open to change, and who were willing to learn and grow. And so that was one of the challenges that they had, was to find lack of qualified personnel. And then government bureaucracy and interference, it was also a big challenge particularly in Ukraine. It was a big challenge. It took a long time to start a business in Ukraine 10 years ago. There was a lot of paperwork to do. And then particularly the tax authorities were a problem 10 years ago in Ukraine. They are a problem in Mexico, and they're a problem in the United States. Not many business people here are fond of our tax authorities. And we learn to live with them, and we give them the obligations that we have to. We pay our taxes, but we don't like them. Let's just say. So they can get in the way easily. And so government bureaucracy and interference was a problem in all of the places that we went. So now let me talk a little bit about Hamilton County, Indiana. And I'll open up for questions here as soon as I finish my presentation. So yeah, I did not conduct the study in Hamilton County, Indiana. I chaired a dissertation, so I was one of, in the United States, when people write a doctoral dissertation, there are usually 3 committee members, and I was one of the committee members. But I did meet the student in person who did this study, Dr. Thomas Roberts. He's now doctor. He's been doctor now for 10 years, who, by the way, was extremely qualified. While he was finishing his doctorate, he was also managing financial organizations that had 2,000 individuals and more. So he was an executive leader, and he conducted this study in Hamilton County, Indiana. And he did this by having entrepreneurs rate skills. He asked entrepreneurs what skills they thought were important here. And he discovered that customer service skills, cost control skills, leadership abilities, and personal attributes, they were perceived by entrepreneurs to be important qualities for success. And I can really see that. Hamilton County is the wealthiest county in Indiana by far, and it's different from the other counties. And customer service is really important in Hamilton County. In fact, a lot of times the people from surrounding counties, if they want to get something done on their cars, or if they want to eat in a restaurant or shop in a store, a lot of times they will drive to Hamilton County just because the service is so great. It is actually very different. You can almost tell the difference from the service. And one of the reasons that Hamilton County has been successfully financially is because there has been a lot of entrepreneurship in Hamilton County, and there continues to be a lot of entrepreneurship. And so a lot of the success has been based because of entrepreneurship and also because of entrepreneurial ideas. If you Google right now the Palladium in Carmel, Indiana, you will see there's a beautiful performing arts center. It looks like something in Italy. And it was built out of entrepreneurial ideas. And so there was a lot of entrepreneurship here. And this is what Dr. Roberts found was Dr. Roberts found these studies in this way by interviewing entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs told him that these skills were the most important. So let me talk just for a moment about removing the barriers to entrepreneurship, and then I will open up for questions. How do we remove the barriers to entrepreneurship for women both in the United States and around the world? So what my studies have shown is, one, we need to recognize female entrepreneurs for their accomplishments. It is a great accomplishment to start a successful business. It doesn't matter if it's a one-person business or a 20-person business. It's a great success to start a business. And if you are a woman and you have started a business, you need to know that you've done something very important. And we focus on Apple and Google, but we forget about all the women who have started businesses, who are feeding their families from those businesses. That's extremely important. So if you have 3 stalls in the market and you can go home and feed your family every night, that's a very successful business, and that's a great accomplishment. That was one of the things that many of the entrepreneurs that we interviewed in Ukraine, they did not recognize how important what they had done was, and we gave them that message. What you have done is extremely important. It's important, and we recognize that importance. Your family needs to recognize that is important. So I think that's one of the keys. Then the second lesson is recognize the value of micro business. We need to understand that the only way that many women are going to be able to support themselves around the world is by starting micro businesses. There will be no great jobs in their town. I have been to 45 countries. I've been to a number of poverty-stricken countries in Latin America. One of the poorest regions, as you know, in the world is just south of the United States, just south of Mexico. There are many poverty-stricken Latin American countries. I've been there. I've been to poor countries in Africa, and I've been to poor countries in Asia. And there are many places in the world that the only way someone is going to be able to feed their family is to start a micro business, a small business. So that's very important, and we need to recognize the value of it. Then I think also we need to provide more training on risk assessment, customer service, leadership, and financial issues. If you are starting a small business, risk assessment is extremely important. I can't tell you how many people I know in our county, in Hamilton County, Indiana. A lot of people, they've tried to start a successful restaurant and they have borrowed money from everyone, maybe millions of dollars, and they build the restaurant and they built it in the wrong place and it failed. And so I would say to all entrepreneurs, be extremely careful about borrowing money to start your business. With many businesses, you don't need to borrow money to start it. You can start small. You can build it on your sales. So risk assessment is important. If you have investors who are willing to lose their money, that's fine. We do have in the United States and in other countries, there are what we call angel investors, and they invest expecting to lose their money and occasionally, and yet sometimes the businesses they invest in will be successful. So if you have good agreements with people like that, that's up to you. But risk assessment is important. Also, understanding the legal environment for your business is extremely important as well. So risk assessment is also extremely important. And then, more training on leadership. This is one of the things that Thomas Roberts found also in his study, is how important leadership was. So leadership is very important as well, as Thomas Roberts found in his study. So we need more training on customer service and financial issues. I did not have very good financial training when I started my businesses, and I lost a lot of money because of it. I lost enough money to buy a good car and maybe a good house because I did not have enough financial training. So don't skip the financial training. And that's why Concordia University and other schools that teach business courses, they're so important. It's very important to get your business training. And I had a master's in human resources, and that helped me. And I did take some extra courses in business, which helped as well. But either get the financial training you need or work closely with a professional accountant, because that's extremely important as well. And then we need more education on how to start businesses with low capital. There are ways to start businesses, as I mentioned, from the profit. And sometimes you can sell something and reinvest that profit, and that's an extremely important way. And this includes starting a micro business while you work a different job. I started my businesses while I was working another job. Eventually, the business became big enough to support me. But to begin with, I had to do that and work another job at the same time. And that's okay. And there are people who operate a small business all of their whole lives as a second job. It may not ever be the main job, but it's a supplemental income. And that can be very important as well. So sometimes we need to think small. We are urged to think big. Sometimes we need to think small. I know a number of entrepreneurs who have told me that they hired a lot of people. They developed a big team, but they found out it was not as profitable as having a small team and doing the work themselves. So that's a reality sometimes. It depends on the kind of business. And then finally, we need to create comfortable spaces for entrepreneurs to work. We have, in the United States, we have what we call co-working spaces. And I remember before the war in Kiev, you had some beautiful co-working spaces there. I worked in some of them sometimes. I actually liked your co-working spaces better than ours. Because we worked as a company, we worked in some co-working spaces there in Kiev. And I think co-working spaces are very important. Comfortable places where entrepreneurs can work. I work in a space here in the United States. I can go there in the middle of the night if I want to and work. I have a key and I can get into the building. And so having comfortable spaces, places where entrepreneurs can work is also very important. So I know that it's a challenging time in Ukraine, but I encourage all of you to think for the future. Some of you live in other countries. And so I encourage you all to continue to think about small business. And finally, let's talk about your questions. What do you perceive as the barriers to entrepreneurship in your world today? So what questions can I answer for you? Okay, Nukta?
Sorry, do you mean me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, can you see me?
I can see you and I can hear you.
Yeah,
Great to meet
it's
you.
great. So, yeah, nice to meet you too. So first of all, thank you for this presentation. Really important, really, well, it was pretty informative for me. I'm really proud that you started your business at so early age. It's really important. I mean, I kind of tried to do the same for my age, or also early, and also work
Great.
early. It's important, I think.
Great.
And it's really proud that you chosen Ukraine to start your first businesses. And I have a pretty simple question, and I believe it's interesting. So if you were to start your first business in 2024, what countries would you choose to register your business, and what markets would like to operate in? It could be worldwide or some specific market. So yeah.
That's a difficult question because it all depends on the kind of business that you're going to start. So, and there are many wonderful places, countries to be based in, as you know. One thing I would say, maybe a Northern European country, because I know they have health insurance. And that's a challenge in the United States. That is a challenge for many entrepreneurs. We do not have good government health insurance in the United States. And so health insurance, and a country with health insurance and pension benefits can be important, because then as an entrepreneur, you don't have to carry those costs yourself. So I think those are, but I would say the other conditions, I would be looking for conditions where countries understand the importance of entrepreneurship and the barriers are lower to it. But there are a lot of good choices out there. So, great.
Will you consider to start in worldwide? So like, if it's a digital history, to expand like many markets, or
Yes,
you will
absolutely.
consider
That's
to only one? Mm-hmm.
no, many markets. That's the reality now because of the internet. Many small businesses have a global reach. Of course, you know, so it depends on whether they're selling products in other countries or not. And if they, you know, but again, it all depends on the kind of business. I am more oriented to service businesses, and in fact, many of in the research I did on Ukraine, many of the businesses were service businesses. Let me pull up a slide here. No, that was a Guadalajara study, Ukrainian study. Many of the businesses, an enormous percentage of the businesses were services, but some were trade. So, but yes, it's possible to start a small global business now. It's possible to start a global business that one person takes care of. But again, it really depends on the product as well. I know we have, for example, we have many YouTubers in the United States who talk about things like how to change your faucet, how to repair your sink, things like that. And, you know, that's their business. So that can be a global reach as well. That's a great question. Other questions?
Thank you.
Diana, you're welcome.
Please.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here and for being here. This presentation has been nothing but wonderful. And my question is mostly related to failure. So as we know, at least 40%, I think, of businesses fail in their first year. And it's kind of hard to just keep it alive and keep it well. And do you have any tips for us on how to make sure that we stay alive with our business? And if there's anything we can do to improve our situation, maybe some cheat codes that you found out about.
That's a great question. So my own philosophy of starting business is don't invest money that you can't afford to lose. That's one of the tips that I would have. And again, I gave you the example of restaurants that start. Restaurants are, if some of you own successful restaurants, you have my greatest respect. Okay. In the United States, restaurants fail often. And it's the kind of business everyone wants their own restaurant that's fun to operate, but it's kind of the reality. So I would say try to start start a business with profit. For example, in the publishing business that I started with one book. I found a guaranteed market for that book. It was profitable. It was not profitable enough for me to feed my family, but it was profitable enough for me to reinvest that money and build that business. And that's the way I built it. So I did not invest any money that I couldn't afford to lose. So I think that's one thing to think through carefully. Mentorship is very important. And I think especially for women, mentorship is extremely important. If you can find someone else who started a successful business, approach them, let them know you're there to learn from them. Don't make them think that you see yourself as an equal, but make them think that you're there to learn. And ask them for a few minutes of their time. And sometimes there are people that are willing to teach us and help us to grow in that way. But that's a hard question, so I don't think I really answered it. But anyway, that should give you a little information to go on.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Other questions? Yaroslav.
Yeah, sorry, my camera isn't working.
No
Your
problem.
presentation was insightful, but I have a question to you. If
Yeah.
you were to start a business, when would you go legal? Like, would you create your business and only after that you like register the company, or would you focus on the creating your documents and only then starting to provide your services?
In the United States, we need to go legal to start with. For one thing, our tax authorities here are very strict. So any income you make in the United States has to be reported. If not, it's no fun for people.
But don't you need like to test your idea first before like creating all of these documents?
It's not in the United States, it's not hard and it's not expensive to start a business. You can start one within an hour. So it depends on the country. But I think as far as testing your idea is concerned, maybe find some people that you can discuss it with that you feel safe, that can help you with your idea. And maybe do market assessment. Market assessment is important as well to do. But I think that varies. That depends on the country laws too, and the taxation and how strict countries are about income. With some countries, I think you can make some money for a while without reporting it, but you can't here. It's like you got to report your income here. That's a great question.
I get it.
Other
Thank
questions? Sure. Marita.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have a
Sure.
small question. From your perspective of view, before the full-scale Russian invasion, where were better conditions for living, working, and making business, in Ukraine or in Mexico?
Well, that's a good question. So as far as the living conditions are concerned, I think Ukraine was better because you had the infrastructure there of apartments and what have you. I remember I interviewed people. I actually did one study in Mexico as early as the 1990s. And I interviewed people in Mexico. I remember interviewing people in the 1990s who were living in, temporary houses kind of made out of maybe old cars or something like that, with dirt floors. So there is, Mexico is an interesting country because it has very, very wealthy people in it, but it has some very poor people. And to this day, there are parts of Mexico where there is deep, deep poverty. And I know there's poverty in Ukraine, but I remember when I lived in Ukraine, if you lived in the country and you had a garden, there were ways for people to survive and not starve. And I'm not sure that's true in Mexico even today. I think there are people who struggle particularly in the country areas, not necessarily in the big cities, but in some of the country areas. I think there are people who struggle with deep poverty. So I think probably Ukraine was better from my perspective. Although, like I said, the government in Mexico has tried. My study in Mexico was done also about 5 years ago, and at that point, the government had tried to provide some funds for entrepreneurs. So, great question. I'm sorry, I'm not really seeing you all in order. You're welcome, Vitaly.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Very interested. I have a question. What do you recommend to open a successful business? Where to start?
Well, think about a product or service with which you could make money. So think also about what you do well. So you can, and think about what you're interested in doing as well. Like I know someone in the United States who was interested in fashion, and she started an small eBay business because of that. And so she discovered that she could make a little bit of money, but I would say be ready to experiment, because your first idea may not be your best idea. For example, as I mentioned earlier, I started a publishing business where I was publishing books for university professors. But the market closed on that as the big publishers caught up. I really lost the market for that, and I had to switch to e-learning, which was a better business. So think in terms of have more than one idea in mind too. Test your ideas out. Talk to your mentors about it. That's a great question. Ivana?
Hi, yes. Firstly, thank you for a presentation. And
Sure.
My question is kind of the continuing from the previous question. What's your personal favorite niche in business?
I don't really have a favorite niche in business. I think if you can make real estate work, in the United States, if you can own properties, that's sometimes a good niche. But again, it all depends, because we have people in the United States that they borrow a lot of money and they buy some terrible houses they think they're gonna fix up, and then they never make money on them. So it depends on the opportunities that you have. It depends a lot on the country that you live in as well. So think about your interest and think about something you do well that other people might even be willing to pay for too, whether it's marketing or what have you. But I hope that helped. Abdullah?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, hello, Professor John. It's just been a pleasure.
Thank you, Abdullah.
It's just a pleasure to hear a part of your story.
My pleasure. Okay, speak up just a little bit. Can't quite hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Great. Great to meet you.
Glad to meet you. My question is what would be the biggest challenge that you faced in your early career?
Well, I think when I started the publishing business, just learning where to produce books was a challenge, and the process by which books are produced, that was kind of a challenge. I started out with a printer who charged rates that were higher than I needed to pay. So I think learning the process is one thing important. One thing I heard another entrepreneur say, and I think this is true. Start in an industry that you know well, because then you don't have to take time to learn about the industry. So if you know an industry well, and I did know some things about the publishing industry, but if you know an industry well, start with what you know well. And you are more likely to be able to assess the risks and the opportunities in an industry that you're familiar with. So thank you, sir. I appreciate your question. Alexandra?
Yeah, firstly, of course, thank you for the presentation. And
Sure.
my question is, what are your thoughts on starting business during some type of crises? Like it may have some significant benefits, such as less competition entering the market. And also, I personally know a bunch of cases of people extremely successfully starting their business in Ukraine in the 90s or now during the war. And so what are your thoughts about that? Are those risks worth the opportunity to hit the jackpot in the business field? And do you agree that crisis is the greatest opportunity to make money and start the business?
Well, first of all, when we talk about risk, I want to say that I don't think taking personal risk, safety risks are not worth anything. I mean, we should never take risks for our personal safety. And I know that many people there are facing those kinds of risks. So I want to make it clear, I don't think people should take the risk of, let's say, starting a business in a town that's in a dangerous area or something like that. But I do think that crisis can be a time where many businesses are started. If you look at the history of Ukraine, and that during perestroika, there were many very successful businesses started. And not some of them, some business owners during perestroika were not ethical. For example, they bought an unused factory for, $10 or whatever. We know that happened. But having said that, yes, I think crisis can be a great time to start a business. It has its challenges too, but it's no secret that in the United States, the defense industry has been a big source of our economy for many years. So I'm not encouraging anyone to start a business related to the defense industry there. I don't mean that. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is crisis times can be a time when a good business is started. Maybe people need food that they can't get. Maybe they're package services. I don't really know the niches. But I know that there probably are opportunities now, but be careful. Don't risk your physical safety.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the answer.
Great question. I have to go here in about 2 minutes. So I've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. All right. I'm trying to see if anyone hasn't asked a question. I don't see the...
Ivana Bolotova, Ivana.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Ivana.
Thank you. I already asked.
That's all right. Go ahead. Oh, you're
No, I mean,
okay.
I already asked my question.
You asked your question already. All right, Alina, got your hand up?
Yes, hello. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. And
Of course.
I would love to know if you personally have some of your favorite finance books which kind of maybe helped you or guide you through your career.
No, I don't. I actually don't. I think you need to talk to financial specialists if you can, even if to professional accountants and what have you. But I do believe as far as personal finance is concerned, it depends on the country that you're in. And so it's a little hard for me to advise you, but I would say try to learn from people who you know are successful financially. If you can get time with people who are successful financially, then that can be that. We have classes here in the United States sometimes that are taught by people who have been successful financially when you just talk about personal finance. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, I believe in, yeah. So you're welcome. All right. Well, great to talk with you all. I've really enjoyed this. Olga, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you very much for your time. Your topic is rather interesting, I hope, for future top managers. So
Great.
thank you. And keep in touch. I hope just to see you sooner again. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, be safe, everyone. It was great to talk to you all.